Hi everyone, welcome back to The Calm Artist. First, I have to give a trigger warning. This episode includes discussion of child abuse, school safety incidents, and systemic neglect involving minors. While there are no graphic details, the content may be emotionally difficult for some listeners. Today, I want to talk about a phrase you hear all the time when something goes wrong. We didn't know. In crisis communication, that's part of a strategy called defeasibility. It's when an organization defends itself by saying they didn't have the necessary knowledge to control or prevent a crisis. And today I'm using the lens of defeasibility to continue the Evasion of Responsibility series. But first, let's break down what defeasibility really means and why it's used, when it backfires, and what should come after if it's going to be part of a real recovery. It's important to study because when that phrase gets used too loosely, it doesn't just sound weak. It starts to sound like we've built a system to avoid knowing in the first place. Defeasibility is one of the image restoration strategies that shows up when something goes wrong and someone says, "We didn't know this was happening," or "We had no way of knowing." And in theory, it works when the facts actually support that. But in practice, it can feel like a deflection. So when developing a statement in times of crisis, the goal isn't to decide whether or not to use the strategy. The goal is to understand what you're really saying when you do. Because the moment you say "we didn't know," people are already asking why not? Whose job was it to know? And what systems failed? And if you don't follow up with action, you've just told the public that you were uninformed and absolutely unprepared. So why is it used so often? Defeasibility often feels like the safest first move. It doesn't admit wrongdoing, it doesn't point fingers, and it gives itself room to regroup. The key, when in use, is to never let defeasibility be your final message. It should just be a setup for what's next: action, correction, and communication. In other words, if you're going to say "we didn't know," you better also say, "Here's how we're making sure we never miss this again." So what crisis are we looking at with the lens of defeasibility? In 2025, I found a case about South Jersey's Gloucester Township School District that made headlines. A young adult escaped their home after being held there in abusive conditions for over a decade. The child had been pulled from the public school in 6th grade and disappeared from the system. What was the state's response? We didn't know. Technically, that's legally sound and true. New Jersey law doesn't require parents to submit curriculums or wellness updates for homeschooled children. So it's not just that they didn't know, it's that they generally don't have to know what goes on according to the law. There was no system in place to flag that child's well-being. And this is where I reference what I said previously, that sometimes "we didn't know" as a statement starts to sound like they're saying we built a system that stops us from knowing in the first place. And that's why defeasibility in this case is directly evasion of responsibility. The district evaded responsibility by redirecting accountability to the law that's currently in place. And in that moment, after the announcement of defeasibility, people are already asking, well, why not? Whose job was it to know? What systems failed? Which leads me to an important segment in this episode. Who are the stakeholders? There's about 4 categories of stakeholders. The primary stakeholders directly affected, which are the student that was abused, the siblings, the neighbors in that area, and the parents who committed the crime. There are institutional stakeholders like the school district, social workers, and the Department of Education. And the third category of stakeholders are advocacy and legal organizations like Homeschool Legal Defense Association, or the Child Welfare Services, and lawmakers. And lastly, the public and political stakeholders like voters, reformers, journalists, and media outlets. You can tell me if this is where the defeasibility strategy collapses or succeeds, because now the stakeholders aren't just questioning the response, they're questioning the design that decision makers like board members, voting public, policymakers, and district leadership made. And that's where it shifts. That's where defeasibility, this whole idea of "we didn't know," turns into something much bigger. A full-on evasion of responsibility, not just by one group, but by the system. At first, it looked like the school district dropped the ball. Simple, clean blame. But once they pointed to state laws shaped by votes, blocked policies, and loopholes defended by homeschool advocates, suddenly the blame doesn't sit in one office anymore. Now it's the district that didn't follow up, the lawmakers who didn't pass stronger protections, the voters who may have rejected reform, the homeschool associations that lobbied for less oversight, and even agencies that didn't flag the red flags. Each group passes the torch, and as that torch moves, the accountability fades. So instead of one clear party stepping up and owning what happened, the crisis becomes shared, blurred, and that's the core of evasion. Not denial, not lying, just diffusion. Everyone holds a piece, which means no one's truly held. And to be honest, that's really the conclusion of this case study on my part. It's no longer responsibility on one district, but with the use of defeasibility leading to an evasion of responsibility, it's all up to the entire community now. So apart from this specific story used, here's what should follow if you're going to use defeasibility and still come out with your credibility intact. Okay, step 1, state you didn't know, fine. But step 2 through 5 is essential. Step 2, here's what we did when we found out. 3, here's what that revealed. 4, here's what we're changing. And 5, here's how we're going to keep you informed. Defeasibility without steps 2 through 5 isn't a strategy, it's just a stall. Now, if you were to personally ask me if I think we didn't know or defeasibility was a good strategy to use at this time, it'd be hard for me to answer. If this situation was fresh and never happened before, I might be able to say we didn't know makes sense. But a situation like this has happened multiple times and in other states, which had to bring about some kind of national alarm. So I guess the question you might ask me is, what strategy would I have used instead? Well, ask me in person or reach out to me and let's talk about it. The goal here is to learn about defeasibility. So what can we learn from this? As a communicator, it's not enough just to repeat the official talking points. You have to pay attention to the gaps. What is leadership avoiding? What are they downplaying? And then step in to clarify what that silence leaves open. It's our job to fill in the missing context so that the public doesn't have to guess. When someone says we didn't know, it's not your job to rewrite the past, but it is our responsibility to show people what's changing next. Because accountability isn't just about pointing fingers, it's about designing a system where failures are less likely to happen again. Thank you for listening. And if you're thinking about where this shows up in your own work, your school, your state, keep asking better questions. That's what communicators do, and that's what I'm learning to do. Maybe we should do a podcast about that soon, identifying gaps and asking the right questions. Send me some articles on that when you have a chance. I'd love a critical thinking practice session. Bye.